much about taking notes or anything like that. Calder, do you want to introduce yourself real quick before I get folks going?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name's Calder Burgam. I'm a researcher and outreach specialist here at the Institute, and I'm excited to lead you through the site.
Cool. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background for tonight's training and kind of why we're doing this one in particular right now. So goals for this webinar are a few things. So one is to understand why power researchers care about campaign finance and lobbying data, and really start thinking about what it can tell us and how we can put that research to use in our organizing. Another goal we have for y'all is to become familiar, of course, with followthemoney.org and to really leave feeling like you understand how to use the tool and could use it, to do research in all the different states where y'all are at. And then 3 is to begin brainstorming campaign finance and lobbying related questions you'd like to answer for your organizing. So, really kind of the spirit of Map the Power and of this kind of power research is that we never just want to do research for research's sake. We always want it to be connected to a larger organizing strategy. And so as we're going through some of these tools, we want folks to be thinking about how that could connect to the work that y'all are doing. So the agenda for tonight will be going about an hour. We already did the welcome and the goals. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Little Sis and Map the Power, and then we'll really spend the bulk of the time with Calder going through using Follow the Money with us. And then we'll wrap it up with a little bit of how Little Sis, the database, and Follow the Money interact together, and a poll to get a better understanding of what y'all want to do next. So a couple of things real quick. I think a lot of folks know this already, but Little Sis, where I work, is both an organization and a database, littlesis.org. So we sometimes call it the opposite of Big Brother. We're a watchdog research group, and then we both do power structure research kind of in relationship with social justice organizations, and then we also oversee littlesis.org, which is our database that is a wiki that is free and crowdsourced and that compiles information about relationships between powerful people, corporations, organizations, and politicians. So we sometimes call it an involuntary Facebook of the 1%. And then about almost a year ago now, after the presidential election, we launched kind of a new project called Map the Power that's really aimed at training and supporting activists and organizers who want to do more of this type of power structure research, both kind of democratizing the different tools that we use, helping people think through what research plans look like, and helping people think about how they can take power research back to their organizations to help shape strategy. And so that's kind of what this webinar series is part of. And there's other ways to kind of interact with that project that I'll talk about at the end. But the way that we really think about kind of power structure research in particular is research with a focus on the power structure. So, power we think of as the ability an individual or entity has to get what it wants, even against opposition, and to shape politics and society along their interests. So power structure research is both investigating and identifying who those individuals or entities are, and then really understanding the networks between them, the organizations where they convene, the relationships between individual people, and then, thinking about how that type of research can help inform the organizing that we're doing. And it's sometimes also called opposition research, strategic research, or muckraking. So if you've heard those words, that's what we're talking about. So like I mentioned, we've done a few different series of these trainings, and there's a lot of different types of research that kind of fall under power structure research, and lots of different types of questions that we often answer if we're trying to understand power relationships. But campaign finance and lobbying is really one of the most essential types of research that we do, and is really kind of the starting point in a lot of ways. And I put some pictures up here of the tax headlines about the tax bill and the fight that's happening right now, kind of exemplifying why campaign finance research is important. So we have top GOP congressmen saying, my donors told me to pass the Republican tax bill or don't ever call me again. Trump gives rich donors massive tax cuts and then asks them for campaign donations. So I think it's almost becoming, you know, as we've been doing these trainings for the past couple of years, it almost becomes less and less necessary to be making the argument to people of why it's important to care about campaign finance, because it's so clear in the way that our economy and our political system is structured and is working, that really our politicians are carrying water for and implementing the agenda of their donors, and kind of the corporate class in a lot of ways. And so if we're going to really figure out how to fight back in those areas, and really win some justice for all of our communities, we need to understand who those donors are, and we need to understand how we can hold them accountable for their actions. So really, you know, a couple of other thoughts as before Calder goes into how you actually do the research of why we would care about this kind of info. You know, one thing is that really donations are indicative of relationships. So it's a sign that people know each other, that they talk to each other, that they've been in the same room, etc. So if you know a politician's particular donor, you know that particularly a donor that's given a lot of money, it's often an indicator that that donor can make a call and quite literally get that politician on the phone to do what they want them to do. It's also kind of a window into a donor's ideology, social and business network, and business agenda, which can be really useful, but at the same time, also kind of hard sometimes to figure out why donations happen at particular times. So it's really kind of one piece of power structure research, but not all the pieces. And then, of course, kind of the flip side of that is that if we're looking at a politician, looking at their donors help us understand who and what is shaping their political agenda, and really kind of help us figure out who our, in some ways, ultimate target is. And then when we think about lobbying relationships, those can also be useful to look at because they indicate what a corporation's policy agenda is, as well as what elected officials they're trying to get to enact that policy agenda. And then it can also be helpful because it connects specific corporations and people to unjust policies that elected officials are pushing, which in turn helps us organize as corporations and not just elected officials as our targets. And I think that, you know, like I said, increasingly it's becoming clear that we can't just organize our elected officials to take action. So it's really about going above them to that donor class, to figuring out how we make sure those people are feeling pressure. So that's a little bit of context to give folks into kind of thinking about why we would care about this information. I'm gonna throw it over to Calder to start really showing us how to actually find the answers and what types of questions might shape this type of research. And then at the end, we'll also talk about some examples of how you can put it into action. So Calder, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and let you share yours.
All right, so everyone should be seeing the Follow the Money home screen. Do we look good?
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks again so much for coming. Appreciate you all being here. And thanks, Molly, for that great introduction. We're gonna kind of get into the weeds here on finance, campaign finance stuff, but I think it's always important to remember why this matters and keep in mind all these connections and how they affect policies and real life things happening. So a little bit about the Institute. We've been around since the early 90s in some form or other. We started as the Project on the Western States, and it was just a regional project. Slowly, other offices closed, but we looked around and saw that there wasn't any group doing state-level campaign finance work at the national level, you know, all 50 states. So we expanded in 2000 and started gathering comprehensive campaign finance data in every single state. We've continued to expand since then in terms of our data gathering, If you're on our homepage and scroll to the bottom, you'll see we have this About the Data section. And so this is going to list all the separate pieces of data that we gather. So our core competency here is this state elections, contributions to candidates. You'll see statewide offices, so that's going to be governor, attorney general, anything elected across the state, as well as legislative offices, Senate, House, the High Court, and then we started gathering appellate court in 2007. We also gather contributions to political parties. That's going to be the state parties, as well as legislative caucus committees. And then we started gathering ballot measure committees in 2003. We also have expenditures in terms of independent spending, as well as a lobbyist spending over here. I will note that these are really dependent on state level disclosure. Some states are much better than others in terms of what they require to be disclosed. So we can't gather this data in every single state. So if you ever have any questions about what the rules are in your state, what we have, you can always feel free to contact us. And then we've also completed some scorecards for the states. So you can always check those to see if your state has strong disclosure. And I will mention too, we started gathering federal election data in 2010. And then we have some local election data since 2006. We gather in a few cities comprehensively. So that's going to be New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C. Then we also get Orange County, California. And we've done a pilot project before, so you'll see as we're doing searches, some other localities will pop up, but we don't continue to gather those. That was kind of a one-time project to see what it was like to gather at the city level. So what we do when we gather the data is we go to the state agencies that collect the campaign finance reports. So if you go here and check out resources and government disclosure, here you'll get a list of all those different agencies that we gather from. So if you ever want to go back and check an original report, unlike federal elections that have a central repository for all their data, the FEC, we have to go to 50 different states to get our data. You can find all the links to those state agencies from our website. If you go to the menu, resources, and government disclosure. So if you're checking out the contribution on our website, want to see the original source that it came from, check out the original filing, you can do that from here. Just find the relevant state agency, click on the link, and they'll each have a database that you can search to find those reports. Once we've gathered the data from all these different state agencies, what we'll do is standardize and code that data. So to standardize, we'll get various iterations of the same contributor. So for instance, AT&T might come in as AT&T Inc., just AT&T missing the ampersand, and we'll combine those onto a single entity on our site so it's easy to search for companies or people. Then we'll code them by their economic interest. And so we have 19 different economic sectors that we can code. Within those sectors, we have sub-industries. And then within those sub-industries, we get specific businesses. So as you're searching by industry, you can go as broad or as specific as you want to see how these interests are spreading their money. So that covers how we get the data and what data we have. For the tutorial today, I thought we'd do a case study on a bill out of Michigan. This is Michigan Senate Bill 574. Basically what it did is allows millage money that was originally intended for public schools to go to charter schools. The DeVos family, you'll recognize the name from Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, are big proponents of charter education. So they were proponents of this bill. So we'll use them as a case study as well. To start, I'm going to go to the My Legislature tool. Now you'll notice down here in our tools section, we have a number of different options. You can dive into any of our data sets really quickly and get broad overviews by clicking on these links or going to specific states. But today we're going to stick with My Legislature to start. And we'll go to Michigan. And we'll stick with 2017. Now, what we've done here is gathered every single lawmaker in the country. Here we'll get a list of all of Michigan's lawmakers. You'll also notice here by clicking on these, you can get some other information. So we've identified legislative leaders, top contributors, recent giving by party of the office holder, and then you can take a look at other office holders. Here's our list. You get some basic information about them here. But then on top of that, we've taken all these lawmakers and filled roster committees. So we have every single subcommittee and committee in House, Senate, and then joint committees as well when those are available. The final piece of my legislature is the legislation page. So for this, we've teamed up with a group called Legiscan. They track bills in every single state, and we get that bill feed. And what's great about this is not only do we get the bill, but we get some information about it as well, including its status. So I'm going to search for Bill 574. Now, there's no search function per se, but I just use my browser search function to find it. And you'll see it here. To get more information on it, we can click on that as a link. Some states will provide a summary of the bill. Others, the summary will be pretty skimpy, kind of like this one. But here we can get more information on the sponsor of that bill. So Dave Hildenbrand. Top donors to the sponsors. In this case, this is just going to be Hildenbrand's contributors. And then events for the bill. And as I mentioned, this can be helpful because it's going to show us what committees this bill was referred to. And we'll see it was last referred to the Committee on Education Reform. So now we can take that piece of information, go back to our committee list, find the Education Reform Committee, and see what kind of money they've gotten from interests that might be lobbying for or against this bill. So here's the roster for the Education Reform Committee. Again, you get some basic information about them, including their leadership position on the committee. And then this will be their lifetime fundraising. Like that sponsor page, you can get contributors to those members. And then for our purposes, we're going to focus on this industry analysis now. This analysis breaks down what lawmakers in the whole chamber received versus lawmakers on the specific committee. So you'll see our key here. So the blue is going to be the average amount lawmakers on this committee, the Education Reform Committee, received from a particular interest, whereas the green will be the average that all lawmakers received from that interest. Get an idea of which interests might be targeting specific committees. So we'll notice here, party is a big target. General business interests, which is kind of interesting, has been targeting the Education Committee more than regular other lawmakers, and labor. What you can do now is actually click on one of these and dive into it further. Before I do that, I'll note you'll see uncoded up here. As I mentioned, we try our best to code every contribution by the economic interest, but just the sheer number of contributions that come in prevents us from getting to every single one. So often you'll see this near the top, but in terms of the whole, we try and keep things coded around 80 to 90%. So this will generally only be around 20 to 10% of the data. But if we dive in, let's check out party contributions, for instance, first. You can see this is all party committees. PACs also would fall under here, party PACs, but it looks like party committees are the only one that have given. If we dive into general business, we'll see more sub-industries. And here you can get a further idea of which groups are targeting the committee. Now, retail sales is an interesting one. Actually, we're going to dive into that in a little bit, but this is going to be where the DeVoses fall. They made their money in Amway, which is a direct marketing firm. So they fall under this retail sales. I'll also point out business associations here. The Chamber of Commerce, as well as other business associations in Michigan, are big fans of charter expansion and private control by schools. So they are included in this business association. If you click on any of these bars, you'll get popped back out. I'm going to point out one more section. It's a smaller difference, but oftentimes on issues that we might be looking at, ideology and single issue comes into play. And so this is kind of a look at specific issue groups. So not necessarily business interests, but folks interested in gun control, and in this case, public education policy, conservative policy organizations we can see on here as well. And even though it's not a ton of money, we do see that they have targeted this committee more than lawmakers on the whole. I'm actually going to dive back into our general business. And you'll have noticed that next to each of these industries, there's a magnifying glass. So if you click on that magnifying glass, you can get a better idea of who the contributors are within that sector. So as you can see here, and we'll take a closer look at this interface a little later on when we check out the Ask Anything search engine. But you'll notice we have a query right here. So we're looking at contributions from the retail sales industry to office holders in the Michigan House Education Reform Committee. And that's going to cover the last 2 years of their filings. It defaults to looking at the members of the committee, but you can always add in who the contributors are. So I'm actually going to add a tab here and then click contributor. And right away, you notice the DeVos family is pretty prominent. So that's a quick look at my legislature and how you can get a better idea of the interest trying to look at bills. Before I move on, are there any questions on my legislature?
Hey, Calder, this is Molly. One thing that might be good, can you just explain for folks real quick, like what a PAC is, the difference between a PAC and a super PAC, and kind of the different vehicles that people use to donate money?
Sure, yeah. And I'll note too, the state level campaign finance field is much different than the federal level. States have pretty wide latitude in how they administer their elections and their campaign finance law. So for instance, in federal elections, corporations can't give directly from their treasuries. But at the state level, in half the states, corporations can give directly. They also have the option to create PACs. So in cases where a corporation can't give directly, it'll start an employee PAC. That PAC is generally controlled by the company itself, but is funded by contributions from employees of the company. Super PACs refer specifically to independent spending. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But when groups try to influence elections through independent spending, they can spend as much as they want, raise as much as they want, but they're not allowed to coordinate with candidates. So for instance, the DeVos's here are only allowed to give so much to Michigan candidates per election. If they want to give unlimited amounts of money, they can start a super PAC. They can't work with the members of this committee, with the candidates here, to determine that PAC's message, but they can spend as much as they want putting out their message in favor or against members of the committee. Any other questions on that, Molly, you think would be good to follow up with?
Perfect. I think that's good.
Okay. Yeah, and as you see, if you see companies giving on here, I will note part of our process is we combine contributions from a company's PAC and from direct contributions from the corporate treasury. And we do that just to make it easier so people know everything that a single company is doing to influence elections. And because it's often impossible to tell whether money has come from a PAC or from a corporate treasury itself, just because these contributions are reported by candidates. And so oftentimes, they might just write AT&T even though they should be writing AT&T employee PAC. So we just combine that all together for ease of use, just so you know, in terms of our process. So As I mentioned before, you can dive into any link on here. We have entity pages, profile pages for all these donors. So I'm going to check out Dick DeVos Jr. here. You click on him and you'll get taken to a new page. And so this has all the information on our site about Dick DeVos. Now he's a good case study. He ran for governor in Michigan in the mid 2000s. He's a major donor and has independent spending targeting him from his time as a candidate. It takes you first to him as a contributor. You'll see a broad overview of his giving. So he's given $39.6 million. You can see most of that has gone to Republicans. This is our coding information. So you'll see direct sales, that's going to be from Amway. And then we do, whenever someone runs for office, this candidate code supersedes their other codes. And so that's an easy way you can search how much candidates have been giving to themselves pretty quickly. This is how much he gave to candidates. You can see he was a major self-funder. He's at the top of the list. Party committees, ballot measure committees, and basic giving trends. When you see this not designated in here, that's going to be contributions to ballot measure committees, as well as if you gave to independent spending groups that don't have a specific party affiliation. For your work, filling in power maps, this employers listed and occupations listed can be very helpful. So in most states, you are required, if you give at a certain threshold, to disclose who you work for and what you do. So you can see listed Amway here. More recently, he's been involved with the WinQuest Group, which is an investment firm, Amway. We do our best when people are involved in multiple business interests to capture their primary business that they're involved in, what they've made the most money from. But sometimes it is difficult, and we'll code them in pretty broad terms because of that. Next, as a candidate, so folks that have run for office, you can get a complete list of what they've done. So here are his elections. You can see ran for governor. You'll note here in some states they run separately and the primary ticket, and then together with a lieutenant governor on the general. And all their money, if they make it to the general, will show up in this general ticket event. So it's not that he didn't raise any money here. It's just that money's been assigned to the general election. We've also created a Competitiveness Index. And so this is a way to determine if elections are monetarily competitive. So if the top fundraiser raised twice as much or more than the next highest fundraiser, it's not considered competitive. So this is a quick way to look at that. And I will note, we have a whole tool on how to look at that. I'm not going to dive into that today because it's less useful for the power mapping, but that can be found in our menu by going to Tools. And you can see how competitive your state elections are. Then, as we've had before, you can check out his top donors, top industries. I'm going to get back to this similarity analysis in a second. But last thing on here is the relationship tab. And so this is another useful tool for all of you. We do our best to find relationships that exist between donors, between businesses and individuals, and then between different businesses as parent companies and subsidiaries. These are manually input, so we do our best to get all of them, but in some cases we even use the work that you all do at Little Sis to create these. So it's not going to be a comprehensive list. We do our best, but if you all are ever working on a specific group and think we should tie some specific folks together, you can always shoot us an email and we'll get those cleaned up on the website for you. Going back to the contributor, we've added this tool, the Similar Contributors tab. Now this is going to take a second to load, but what it does is it looks at the contributor here, Dick DeVos, and compares them against every other contributor in the database. And so what you start to see when you look at these is networks that form. And so you can see who he's giving to and what other contributors are most similar and who they've chosen to target. While that loads, I'm going to open up another tab here so we can check out his independent spending. That's going to be that tab here. And since he was a candidate, you'll see that he was targeted by spending. And you can get a quick look of who spent on those races and then which elections they were involved in. And then, as always, if you're ever interested in more, getting more information on these spending, on these expenditures, you can click on the magnifying glass. It'll open up a new tab for you, and you can dive into looking at the information. So, seeing the position of the spenders, for instance. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a little bit. So that covers the entity page. While that loads, I might take some questions. Like I said, this is querying the whole database, so these take a second to load. But we'll check back in a little bit, and we can go over that. But are there any questions on the entity page? Anything contained in here?
Manira, were there any questions from the chat channel?
There don't seem to be any questions yet. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and use the chat channel to ask them, and then we can ask Calder when we have a break.
Sure. All right, so I'm gonna pop out. I'm gonna leave this going. Let it load here. Like I said, it is querying the whole database on that search, so those can take a little bit of extra time. I've gone back out to our homepage. So once you get familiar with the database and kind of have an idea of what we have available, the main tool you'll probably use is this AskAnything search engine. This is what I use most on the day-to-day, and this allows you to dive in as deep as you want, or just get broad views on contributions in specific states, years, by industry, whatever you want. This also allows you to enter any of the data types. So right now it defaults to contribution data, but if you click on this, you can check out independent spending data and lobbying expenditure data as well. But we'll stick with this contribution data for now. It also looks at all three levels, all three jurisdictions, so federal, state, and local. We're going to check out state for the moment. And then you can look at it from two sides. So the contributions from side, that's going to be your contributors, and then contributions to, and that's going to be recipients, candidates, ballot measure committees, party committees. So we have a number of options here. I'm going to take a look at the DeVos family. Like I said, as we saw on the My Legislature page, the DeVos's were big givers. And actually, this is a good example now. The Similarity Analysis is loaded. And so when we look at Dick DeVos and his giving, we can see that the DeVos clan actually pretty much gives as a block. They are very consistent in giving the same amount and to the same people. So you'll see here when a relationship is established, it will note that in our similarity analysis. It'll also tell you how many folks received money from these similar contributors. So in this case, Betsy DeVos and Dick DeVos. And then what percent of their contributions are shared. So 78% of Betsy DeVos's contributors also receive money from Dick DeVos, which is quite high. And then you can even get a side-by-side look at who those recipients are of their contributions. So as you're looking at this, I encourage you to think about what kind of networks might exist. And we do our best, as I said, to create these relationships on the site. But all of you probably have better on-the-ground knowledge of the networks that exist in your area. So this might give you some ideas. But also, if you know that, for instance, William Oberndorf and Dick DeVos go to the same church. That's something you can start building on to create these relationships and finding ties between donors. Since this did just load and this is a helpful tool, does anyone have any questions on the similarity analysis? Not seeing anything right now, so I'll hop out. But if you do have any questions, we can come back to the similarity analysis.
Hey, Calder, sorry, I was on mute. We actually do have a couple.
Okay.
So one is there a glossary of terms anywhere that kind of helps explain some of the keywords that Follow the Money uses?
Yeah. So at the bottom, we have this help section. So we do have tutorials, a bunch of recorded webinars that we've done that will help walk through some stuff on the site if you're curious about how to use tools. And then we do have this glossary. So this is going to be all the key terms that you might be curious about from various offices to contribution types. Any lingo that we use on the site, you'll find down here.
Great. And then another one was, is there any way to save research, like save either like the results that you get or the searches that you've done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can show you a little bit more in depth later on, but the short answer is yes. I would encourage everyone to sign up for a My Follow the Money account. I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but it's really easy. If you haven't registered already, basically just give us your name and your email address, and tell us if you're journalist, advocate, kind of what you're doing. And that will enable you to download data as well as save your searches on our site. I will note too that all the links we create with our searches are hard links. So once we've created our query using the AskAnything search engine here, our result URL will take you back to exactly the same query and the exact same display that you have up. So you can send those to folks, keep them for yourself. If you, for instance, are just searching a candidate and don't have any year restrictions on, as that candidate gets more money, that link will automatically update with those new contributions.
Cool. And then another question we had was, is there a way to tag people or groups within the site?
Yeah, right. We don't really have any way to tag specific groups. We don't have the same setup that Little Sis has with the wiki and being able to have other folks edit. We do that just because a lot of academics use our site, and so we wouldn't be able to check work fast enough to also ensure that everything is 100% right. But if you are working on a group, like I said, you can always send information our way that you think should be on the site, such as relationships or specific economic codes. Or if you're doing a search for a contributor and see that there's multiple versions of them showing up, send it our way and we can clean it up for you. But in terms of making changes on the site, we don't have any way for users to do that.
Cool. And then one more question. I know there's a couple others, so we'll answer those at the end if we have time, or we'll figure out how to follow up with people. But Juan was wondering, does the website make the raw data available, including the documents that were used to input the data into the website?
Good question. So we don't have the actual documents available to you. What you can do, I'm going to go back, let's see, to our previous search here. Like I said, you can download any contributions you want. So once you're logged in, for instance, then you can click on this record button in any search, and this is going to shoot you or give you every single transaction as long as the dates are there too. And so then you can go and find those original reports that these would fall in to see the original documentation. What we also do is, you'll notice here we have this 100% available reports collected. We do document which reports have been collected. So if you dive into that, you can search by year or by filer that was listed there. And then we can even go in further and see which reports have been gathered that apply to that filer. So this is our way to make sure that we have everything, kind of our record keeping. But then if you're searching for a specific contribution on the original documentation, yeah, I would just use the date on a contribution to find the relevant report. Or if you're having trouble, again, we're here to help. So feel free to email or call, and we can help find that document that you're looking for.
Great.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to dive back into the Ask Anything search engine. Like I said, this is kind of your main entrance point into the site. I'm going to search the DeVos's here real quick. So look at specific contributor. You can search for a single group. So I can do DeVos, and you'll notice, the whole family pops up. If I want to get all of them at once, we have this select multiple option. So that's going to open up this interface. And now I can type DeVos here. If it's a common name, I can even filter and only find DeVos's, for instance, that are in Michigan, and hit search. And they can come up. They come up there. And then to add them to my search, you just click these arrows. And so, yeah, the DeVos's are a big family, and they've been giving at all levels. So from grandparents to kids to grandkids. You'll notice that some of these DeVos's are even students. And that's another way you kind of know that they give, their giving is coordinated. When you see students giving thousands of dollars in similar fashion to their parents, generally that's a good indication that they're giving as a group. So I've gathered most of the DeVos's here. And if you want to search for another group, for instance, if you were interested in what Amway was giving, you can add that to your search, hit search again, and then just add it in. I'll grab these variations too. You can hit OK. You'll notice that then shows up in your query. And whenever you add a new variable in here, it will add that to your query, so you know exactly what your data universe is. Real quickly, I'll just explain what some of the rest of these tabs are. Parent organization uses that relationships tab. So when we've set up a parent and a child relationship between a corporation, for instance, a subsidiary, you can search that here. So we could search Amway. I think Altacore also would show up as a subsidiary. Industry, that's going to be those same 19 economic sectors we talked about before. And you can select as many or as few of those as you want. Location is helpful if you want to see who's giving in your area, or really in any area. If you click on that, you can search by city, state, or zip code. For organizers out there, I think this is also a helpful tool if you're trying to locate folks in your area that you think would be good to mobilize. So this isn't only for finding the big power players, the folks that are giving thousands, millions of dollars. You can search small contributors as well. So you can put in your local zip code, sort by the contributors that are giving most often. Even though it's only $5 a pop, those are folks that are going to be motivated. And if you're seeing that they're giving to a ballot measure interest that you think aligns with your interests, or a candidate that aligns with your interests, you can start to get an idea of who might be good to motivate to get out for your cause. So that zip code is pretty helpful. One note, for privacy purposes, we don't give out whole addresses, even though they are in the original data, and we do use them for our standardization. We don't provide those to folks just because of privacy issues. Types of contributors deals with whether it's a non-individual or an individual, so people versus PACs, organizations, companies. And then types of records are helpful as well, especially the within certain dates. So if you have a piece of legislation that's come up, you can start to get an idea of whether contributions came in, before or after from interests that might have sought to influence it. On the contributions to side, We can search specifically on their contributions to candidates. And then within that, you can slice and dice that as much as you want. So, how much have they given to a specific candidate or in a specific race? How much have they given to Republicans? How much have they given to incumbent winners? You can get as specific as you want in this, or just look at how much they've given to all gubernatorial candidates, for instance. This office holder is going to be what you saw in the My Legislature page, and we'll touch on that a little bit more when we narrow our search. Ballot measures are here. Again, as I mentioned, if you know a ballot measure aligns with your interests, you can search by subject and find ballot measures that deal with your issue area specifically, and then find donors to committees for or against that ballot measure. We do get money to political parties, as I mentioned, and then when available, money to independent spenders. Now that is it depends on disclosure, but when it's available, we'll have that. So I'm just going to grab a few years here for the DeVos's. Again, limit that to state. You see it added to my query, and hit go. So you can see here they've given $15.4 million as a family, and that's just since 2010. So that's going to exclude his gubernatorial run, which was another 30 million or so. Here, these different display options can be used however you like. You can add as many to each other as you want. So for instance, if we want to see which election jurisdictions they gave to, in which years they gave, you can start adding variables. And then same as before, if you want to dive into the records on any one of these lines, you can click on that magnifying glass. You can add tabs here, and when you add those, it adds it to your URL. So again, if you save these URLs and have a bunch of displays that you like, and then you send them to someone, all those displays will show up. We can see the contributors here. We also have whether they are in-state or out-of-state. So, when they've been giving to folks in Michigan versus giving outside of Michigan. You can also look at that if you're searching on a candidate, see how much they've received from out-of-state interests. So that could be helpful as well. I know we're running a little short on time, so I'll show one last function here. I'm going to narrow our search. And again, we were looking at the Education Reform Committee before. So if we go into contributions to office holders, this gives us a number of different options to look at office holders, but we're going to look at a specific legislative committee. Get education reform. We want the Michigan House Reform Committee. That's been added to our query, and now we can hit go. It keeps our same display options that we had open before, so we're going to open up a new tab and look at the contributors as well as those office holders. And so this is a pretty quick and easy way to see these relationships that are formed between all these various folks. And so these can be quickly plugged into the little sys database. Any questions on Ask Anything? I know there's a ton of information there. I didn't get to everything in here, but I encourage you to play around with it. If you have any questions on it, always feel free to contact us, and we can walk you through that more thoroughly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Calder. This is really great. I think we're going to skip these last few questions just so that we give people all the info that they need for next steps. But we'll be sure to include a way that you can contact Follow the Money. We'll send around the slides and the recording of this and contact info for Follow the Money, so that as people are kind of playing around with the tool, you can be sure to reach out to them if you're having particular questions. So yeah, thanks so much, Calder, and thanks everyone for jumping on. A couple of things. As we usually do, we're gonna end the call with a poll so we know a little bit more about what y'all are hoping to do next with your power research. So if you're on your computer, you should see the first question just popped up. This question is, do you want to participate in a project to power map some Trump donors? And the idea with this is that the Little Sis team has kind of curated a list of key Trump donors and other people that are benefiting off of the Trump agenda right now, but that we don't actually know a lot about. And so you'd be helping us kind of build out power research profiles about them using both Follow the Money and Little Sis. So folks can go ahead and vote now. There should be a little poll in front of you. And we'll give people a couple more minutes so we can select yes or no thanks. Cool. So then our next question is, as part of Map the Power, we are talking with folks on the phone who either are interested in kind of learning more about power research, more about Little Sis, etc. But we have a big list of folks right now, so we want to know kind of who we should talk to first. So if you're interested in learning more about the Map the Power project, if you have questions about how to set up a research plan, etc., let us know if we should talk to y'all. So you should see that question popping up on your screen again. And we'll give people a few more seconds. We'll give people 10 more seconds to answer. And then the third question we have for y'all is, do you want to host a Map the Power training where you live? So part of what we're doing with this project is both creating a curriculum that you can share with people that are part of your community and that are organizing. And then in some cases, we can have Map the Power trainers from Little Sis come to you. So if you're interested in either of those, click yes, and we'll follow up with you. Great. And that's our last question. So for folks who are interested in continuing to participate in these trainings, we're going to have another one next month. We'll send around the date, but it's going to be focused on researching large nonprofits and foundations. So looking at things, for example, like think tanks that forward Islamophobia, or the family foundations of very powerful hedge fund managers, knowing who's on the board of their big nonprofits, and family foundations, knowing who they're giving money to, etc. So folks should keep on the lookout for that. And then the last thing that I wanted to ask folks is that we're kind of in the midst of a winter fundraising season at Little Sis. We're trying to raise $10,000 so that one of our donors will match it with another $10,000. So if you're looking for a group to give for this winter, definitely think of us. You can go to littlesis.org/donate. And all that money will go towards continuing to improve the technology on littlesis.org, continuing to fund this Map the Power project so that we can keep training and building teams of awesome power researchers all across the country. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks again to Calder. We'll be following up with y'all in an email soon.